Hello and welcome to another video about sound design. This video is going to be about the Mass Effect 3 trailer I did. So as you can see, this session is bigger than the Overwatch one. This is because there's a lot more sound going on. There's a lot more things. Within the other one, it's just McCree sitting inside of a cafe. But in this one, there's just like explosions and husks, which are like zombie people, and spaceships and giant things called the Reapers that come down and destroy the Earth. So obviously there's going to be more audio to work with. So how I started this was I went through and I did memory locations. You probably saw it in the Overwatch one, but I didn't explain it. So what memory locators are these. It's a really handy tool to allow you to navigate through your session, but also allows you to sync up sounds. So if I wanted to sync up my explosions, when I get around to doing my explosions, I'm like, okay, so where are those explosions? I'm like, oh, I've already done it, so I can just go explosions. And I can then sync all of my explosions to where I've already gone through and frame by frame located it. It's a really handy tool. It just speeds up editing a lot, and I always do it for all of my clips that I do. So where I started for this was at the start. If we just want to quickly listen to the original, this is the original soundtrack. This is the logo. And here's Moen. And that's made up of 7 different components. I'll go through each one of them separately. I'll just show you. So here we are. We have this sound, which is so this adds to the transition of when it goes from the Omnitool, which is what this is called, to the lower screen, and then we add another sound. This is kind of like a low growl that I wanted to add because it ties in with the theme of the clip, with the Reapers and the husks and all of this apocalyptic kind of style. And then we add some more, which is these kind of like the little fizzes. So these two are like little electric kind of like buzzes, and they really and these are to kind of like highlight the sci-fi kind of vibe. And then we add it with this. And then finally we've got this bed, this underlayer that really just brings everything together. And then we have one more sound, which is this. And without that, it just doesn't have that sort of high-end resonance. It just doesn't have that kind of the idea of it's meant to be a blade, and then that kind of servo-y camera kind of peel away. These are all just like cinematic kind of sounds. No, not so much in the terms of realistic, but when you play them all together, they all complement each other. So as you can see, there's some parts of this where I've been fading and editing. So obviously this sample was a lot longer than what it used to be. So then what I've done, I've just cleverly cut it shorter and then put it to how I want it to be. So I manipulated the sound and made it fit. This also works for the landing gear. If we just listen to this, it sounds all junkly and clanky. But when you have all of these different layers underneath it, it kind of hides those gaps. So same thing with when you're working with dialogue as well. Like nothing sounds great until you put it into context. So that goes for sound effects too. Adding these little details one by one and soloing them, you come under the impression of like, oh, does this sound good? But then you just have to be holistic when you think about sound, and everything has its place, and you need to put them all in for them all to work. So with this sound, it's just a bunch of different little like lifting servos that I've then cut and kind of manipulated into making them fit within this. Another way that this has been achieved is through the Ladybird. If we just give that a listen on its own. And the funny thing is, this is actually a recording that I did, which is the sound of me flapping this bed sheet that I recorded. So if we just listen to this sound on its own. So what I've done, I've taken that flappy sound and I've pitch shifted it up and then time stretched it to fit within the window where the Ladybird is. And it sounds a bit time stretched, but when you put it into the context of everything else, it just adds that kind of little flutter, that kind of thing that if I don't play it, it doesn't sound right. There's something missing. So just by even adding this sound, it just makes the picture sound more complete. So moving on to some of the other stuff, I'll just go through some of the highlights of the session that I really enjoyed doing. So for example, this is one of the when the husk is on the stick. That's comprised of lots of different little sounds. And just by adding these different little like textures, you end up building up to something that sounds really, really cool. And in the context of the film, it just sounds really kind of space age. Adding these little kind of flares of the growls and that, it really adds the level of detail that I was going for. And there's another scene like this where I could have left it blank. I could have not added Foley for this, but just even that kind of like how long was that? Like what, a couple of seconds? Look how many sounds there are for that couple of seconds. It's literally this time here. Look at everything that's in there. It's just that level of detail that's gone into this. And if I just play some of these tracks, like, you'll understand what I mean. That's just all of the husks jumping on them. And then they've got some gunshots and stuff like that to highlight the action. And then you've got all of these husk sounds as well. What, the zombie sounds. But when you put that all together, it just sounds like a cohesive scene. It's like little pit parts like this where these little swishes. They sound weird, like why have you put them there? Well, when you add them to this huge scene of all this debris, it just highlights the sense of that these explosions are huge and they're causing all of this debris to just fly super fast. And all of this debris is coming towards the camera. This is all flying past the camera, so we need that kind of sense of that this debris is flying towards us. It's not loud in the mix, but it's loud enough to give the effect. Moving on to another one of my favourite scenes, the close-up of the soldier where he goes into slow-mo. So these guns have been like layered up. So we have one layer, and then we add in the second layer, and then we have another set here. So on their own, on its own, it's then we add that second layer in. Just kind of highlight stuff. And then we've got this third layer up here. And that really adds the high frequencies. So when we play them all together, we get this really futuristic gun which has power, has punch in the high frequencies. And it feels like this gun is powerful and it's killing these husks in one shot. And then you've also got all the different levels of husk. There's like 7 tracks of husk. 7 tracks of like just in the background, in the foreground, just littered around. Because there's quite a few of these things around, so you've got to try and make sure that you tell this story within the sound. So there's another 2 here, and then there's like 1 more up here. And then as we move on, we've got this scene here. I mean, like originally this was like silent, because I thought, yeah, space is silent. Then I realized this is a video game and this is a trailer, and I think it'd be quite cool to have like all of these huge explosions to make a sound. Just to really kind of highlight the level of like destruction going on. So I wanted to save the identity of these Reapers till the end, and I wanted to really showcase how terrifying they are. So the way I did this was kind of like have this low rumble, because these things are absolutely huge, like skyscraper huge. So we have this that moves along with the darkness of the shadow to indicate that something huge is coming. And that plays underneath. And then we have all of these sounds here. And that's just a sound of like metal being scraped along the floor. But when you add the reverb, it just adds that kind of like metallic sound. That's just to add more character to the sound. But then when you start adding these different layers, that sound to me is more like the language of Reapers and how they interact with each other. It's heavily influenced from the song Leaving Earth, from the soundtrack, where they had this huge orchestral stab, and it just sounds terrifying. And I wanted to capture that and add it into here because I feel like that's a very big staple of what the Reapers sound like. So if you keep going through, keep adding layers. These are all just little servos. And then you start adding these huge sounds. All of these mysterious sounds of like, do we really know the source of these? Like, we know it's big, we know it's kind of got a metal kind of feel to it, and then you've got all of these kind of hisses to indicate that these things are kind of machines, but in fact they are actually organic. And then we finally just want to talk about Foley. I know I spoke a little bit about it in the Husk scene, but throughout there's like these little these little footsteps here and there, and they just really help add that level of detail that I was going for. So if I take everything out and I just have this one scene here, it's barely noticeable if you're not paying attention, but all of these happen. All of these are there. It's just they're low in the mix because when we talk about the entire scene as a whole, we want the gunshot, we want the action. And it just helps accent like his fall, so that we know that that when he does fall, we do hear it. Without it, it sounds weird. So, like always, if you want any questions about this session or you want to know how I did something, be sure to leave a comment and I'll get back to you on that. I'm going to be posting another one of these about my other clips, so go check those out. As always, thanks for watching. Hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.